Well, the game of the year did not disappoint. Actually, we got extra time with it as well. Goes into overtime and ends with a weird miscue. Hello, everyone. Welcome to Slasher U. I'm your host, Christian Rao, here with my co host, Steve Feck. And we're going to break down the number one team, South Carolina, defeating number two, Stanford, 76-71, final in overtime. This game was absolutely amazing. I know you and I both had our eyes glued to this one, and it didn't disappoint, Steve.
It did not, added the fact that it was on national TV. It has so many positive implications, not only for this NCAA season, but I think as far as growing the game, having the NCAA maybe throw more money marketing wise behind it. I think a game like this even really impacts the WNBA because they need to start growing their crowds as well. But that's a topic for another day. There's plenty to break down in this game, and actually breakdown is what happened to Stanford, especially in overtime. They, Sarah Vanderveer had said at halftime, we've got to cut down on the turnovers, and the turnovers, especially late in the second half and into overtime, absolutely derailed what it otherwise looked like for, I would say, 70% of the game. It looked like it was a sure Stanford win.
Yeah. Well, one thing that we know that South Carolina has is depth, and we've seen that all
Yes.
season long so far. And it looks like that depth was the last point that gave them the win. Even when Boston went out with foul trouble, when Brink went out with foul trouble for Stanford, you could see the difference that South Carolina had the tenacity. They found a way to come back. South Carolina was down in this game, especially early. I mean, at the end of the first quarter, they were trailing by 10. This was just not what they expected to start this game off, but they found a way to win. And in great fashion, if you will. Boston with 14 points, Zia Cook with 13 points, and then Hall really stepped up in this one, 12 points in it. She really did some good minutes off the bench. The Stanford side played well, especially Cameron Brink, 25 points for her. She did absolutely amazing. I really like what I saw from Cameron Brink. We talked about it in the preview a little bit. I was concerned about the play of Haley Jones, how she hadn't got going yet. She wasn't really averaging low points. I know that she was trying to move her game to facilitate a little more. She did have 6 assists. We did see her with 9 rebounds, but we only saw her for 11 points. We saw her 5 from 19 from the field. As much as she was shooting, it wasn't going down and helping her out. She shot 1 3 and it missed. That was, I think, a huge hurt for Stanford in this one. They really needed Haley Jones to step up, and the shots were just not falling for her, Steve.
And players go through stretches like that. When you watched her play, it wasn't, her head wasn't hanging. It wasn't a competence thing. It's just, I think that she's being asked to adjust to different roles depending on the opponent. So that may have something to do with it. But Haley Jones's performance in this game comes down to Zia Cook. Zia Cook badgered her throughout the second half. And I mean, I think it basically not only threw Jones off her game, I think it took her really out of the game for Stanford. And what Zia Cook did, I mean, offensively, a lot of those points came late, but what she did defensively, that was the key to this game outside of the terrific production of the Gamecocks bench, which we all know how deep South Carolina is, but they probably actually played better in the first half when you had the bench players in there rather than the usual starters.
This game ended weird. It ended with a rebound from Stanford with a couple seconds to go, trailing by, I believe, 2 points at the time. And one of the younger players on Stanford turned and called a timeout when they did not have any.
Have one.
They were awarded excessive timeouts, which is a technical foul that gave South Carolina 2 shots at the free throw line and the ball back to finish the game. It was a weird way to end such an amazing matchup. I mean, this was a 5-point victory, but by no means is this truly a 5-point victory because of that. I mean, this is like a 2-point win if you think of it, if anything. But yeah, what a weird way to end that one. How do you fix that? How do you make sure that doesn't happen? You saw them in team huddles. You saw that happen. Is that a coaching error? Is that a leadership of who's like the leader of on the court at that time's error? What went wrong, you think, for that that moment, Steve?
Well, again, we weren't able to listen to what was going on in the huddle, but if it wasn't the head coach, one of the coaches had to mention more than one time to emphasize the fact we have no more timeouts. Don't call a timeout. We can't afford the technical foul. We have no timeouts. And then as you're coming on the court, yes, your team leader needs to say, hey, we have no timeouts. But even with that being said, and we've seen it throughout, our sports history times as fans here, players just in the moment, you're taught, okay, it's a close game. You get the rebound, you pick up a loose ball, you call timeout. It's almost like an instinct, and you're not thinking. That comes with experience. So it's a little bit of everything, but to me, that's telling me that was not specifically stated in that huddle. And that kind of surprises me given, Tara's credentials, and she has a terrific staff as well. So you don't want to point fingers because, again, you didn't hear what was going on there. And maybe it was just a freshman mistake. I can't imagine that she forgot in that 20-second span time that they had no timeouts.
Yeah, that technical was actually on Kiki Irifin. That happened. Again, a young player calls that timeout. They got to know when that happens, regardless of what. But I agree with you. I do think it's a coaching thing. They got to make sure their players know, especially when you're in the thick of that moment. You're not thinking of that. You're thinking about you got to just do the next step. If that's calling a timeout because the time's running down, getting the score, you got to have good coaching. So unfortunately, we talked about in the preview, these are two of the best coaches that we've seen in probably all of college basketball. There was a misstep on the coaching side.
It happens. As for Stanford, they're going to take on Florida Gulf Coast the day after Thanksgiving. Looks like they're going to spend their Thanksgiving holiday in Hawaii as they head for the Rainbow Showdown. They'll start off against Florida Gulf Coast. And for South Carolina, they're going to take on Cal Poly on Tuesday night. That should be a very good game. South Carolina should get back into their winning ways. They will finish out the weekend with a game Sunday against Hampton, and then we'll see them finish out the month of November against UCLA. What do you think about this game? I thought this game was fantastic. I thought it lived up to the game of the year, Steve. I think you said the same thing as well. This should be a fantastic season for South Carolina. I think Stanford's going to be right in the thick of it all season long as well. But what was your thoughts as well? Let us know your comments, your predictions for the rest of the month for South Carolina and for Stanford. Hit us up in those comments. And while you're there, hit like and subscribe. And thank you as always for watching SlasherU.